Recently, CIG showcased the upcoming loot system. Now, this is a feature that is not going to be part of 3.4, but this is a feature that is going to be coming in future iterations of the game. And you have to remember that the loot system that they're showcasing is not, in any way something that could remotely be considered a finished loot system. This is instead something that is the foundation of what will become the loot system in the game later on down the road. This is the underpinnings, the foundation of how the loot is going to work and how we are going to be able to pick up and retrieve loot. When we're out and we're doing missions in bunkers or on space stations or even in crashed spaceships, this is how things are going to work. It's going to obviously have an impact on many of the missions that we do. Now, in a way, it is kind of a bit of a throwback to the early days of the 2.0 patches when you could get the whiskey bottles from the original SPK, or you could get, there wasn't a crash, but there was a blown up Starfarer around Yella in that very early iteration of the game, and you could retrieve sniper rifles and shotguns from the crates floating around that broken up wreck. And that was loot that was just intentionally placed by the game developers, and it would respawn, I guess, on a timer. And it was all right, but it was a system that you would have to maintain very diligently, and it would be very work intensive in order to maintain that. So what CIG is doing is they're basically building, their random loot spawning system. There are certain what we can call loot nodes, which are boxes that you open up. And what CIG is doing is kind of creating the logic which decides what's in that box, depending on where you are, who you're fighting, what you're whatever circumstances could affect the outcome of that loot roll, so to speak, as in what you get as a reward. So this is not something that is going to, all of a sudden result in like, oh, you've got an epic quality AR, or you've got an epic quality Galente, or a blue, or a green. That's not what this is. This is the underpinnings that allow something like that to exist in the Star Citizen universe. Now, you would think that, someone like myself who comes from a much more classic MMO world would be all in favor of, epic quality this and rare quality that and uncommon and all that. But I don't think really that it's entirely necessary to go down that road. I think that while it's been a tried, tested, and true system for the game, I think that we can do more interesting things with different approaches to how we reward players and, the loot that we get. And I feel like we can kind of get away from a system like that and do something better. Now, one of the things I've always found a little bit perplexing about Star Citizen, at least in its current state, of course we're not talking about a finished product, is that most of the firearms that we see in Star Citizen, they're basically all, purpose-built manufactured weapons from recognized manufacturers. There's all these different gun manufacturers, and they all make these different models of pistol or shotgun or assault rifle, or semi-automatic rifle or automatic rifle. They create these kind of perfect and very well done weapons. But in a world like Star Citizen, I don't think that that's necessarily where you would find most of your weapons. Because the world of Star Citizen is humanity living in different colonies distributed all over, this portion of the galaxy, I don't think that you would see as much kind of focus on heavy industry or large industrial concern produced weapons. And I think that the weapons that you would see in the hands of colonists or citizens out on the edge of the universe would reflect more the products of smaller cottage industries local to that area. One of the more interesting phenomena that we've witnessed, especially over the last 10 years, is, I would say largely thanks to, things like YouTube, is the fact that knowledge that used to be specialized to a few people is now far more widespread and far more accessible. Everything from how to fix your car to how to bake a cake. You can find a tutorial on how to do it step by step on YouTube. Some of the tutorials are of varying quality. But the amount of knowledge that people have access to right now, currently, just the average human being, is unparalleled in human history. And this is, of course, is going to have much larger effects for the human race. But one of the industries that it affects is the arms industry. People are building their own firearms now. And this is a clip from a Brandon Herrera video where he's basically using the functional principles of an AK-47 to create an AK-50, an AK that fires 50 caliber rounds. And this is all based off of experimentation. Other people may look at this and say, oh, hey, I kind of want to experiment with that idea. It's easier for the average person, especially someone who has specialized knowledge in terms of metallurgy or machining, to look at something like this and say, hey, that's actually an interesting idea. And going forward 1,000 years, what would that result in? And I think there would be far less of these bearing rifles and much more of these kind of cobbled together rifles that are just put together out of spare parts. Like if you think about a situation like Grim Hex, chances are getting bearing deliveries out to a place like that is fairly unlikely, but with enough scrap metal floating around in space and enough broken up ships in the area, you can probably get enough components to make some very interesting weapons. And I think that, loot would allow us to kind of explore these types of ideas, and would also allow us to create weapons that in the lore, you would have a valid reason for them not being as neat and tidy and as polished in appearance as, these other kind of industrial production counterparts. Or even if you think about the existing weapons that are in the game, the existing rifles, shotguns, and submachine guns, what happens when a lumen breaks down? A lumen submachine gun that uses energy projectiles. What happens when that breaks down, but you happen to have the guts of a P8 sitting next to you? Well, couldn't you modify the exterior of the lumen to accommodate the inner workings of a P8 or something like that? And it would allow us to create some very interesting Frankenstein guns while still kind of keeping to the basic principles of how a P8 works or how a lumen works, without changing things up too much. A gallant or a gallant energy rifle with the inner workings of an AR within it. Things like that. And so I think that there would be an interesting lore area to explore with these kind of cottage arms dealers or these small-scale arms builders and dealers in various areas like Grim Hex or the recently removed Levski. Oh, geez, I'm already forgetting the name of such a wonderful place. But things like that. I think that, you would see something like that. And technically, even in Loreville, maybe there's an underground arms dealer because they don't allow the sale of weapons to ordinary civilians. They don't, there isn't a weapons shop in Loreville, but maybe there's somebody you can meet at the end of an alley who will sell you some cobbled together weapons that will work within Loreville, or at least that you can purchase. Even using existing, ammunition from different weapons, so you still have a little bit of compatibility and a little bit of accessibility. I think that it would be a cool area to explore in Star Citizen. So while I am looking at the at the foundations of the loot system that we're about to get, I kind of hope that CIG kind of opens up the floodgates a little bit and allows some more creative things to happen with firearms in the Star Citizen universe. It's going to be very interesting to watch, and hopefully they kind of do go down this road, because I think that, in all honesty, it would make for a better and much more immersive game.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.